So that process of breathing is what we call pulmonary ventilation. Okay. And remember, pulmonary meaning things related to the lungs. Okay. The next event would be known as external respiration. I think you know the meaning of those words individually. This is just gas exchange between pulmonary blood and the alveoli. Okay. Um, and so this is where the blood is being brought, to the alveoli. Oxygen is being loaded into the blood. Carbon dioxide is being unloaded from the blood. So we just saw that happening at that respiratory zone. That is external respiration, meaning we brought air from the outside and we are putting that oxygen into the bloodstream. Okay, we see a picture of it right there, external respiration. Then what we do with those gases that we've just put into the blood, or gases that are being brought to, the alveoli for release of that CO2 is this is called respiratory gas transport. Okay, this is just basically saying that we carry respiratory gases in the bloodstream. That is an event of respiration because if that didn't happen, ultimately we wouldn't have respiration the way we know it. The last event of respiration would be internal respiration. So we've taken the oxygen through this blood capillary, writing on the red blood cells, and we have now brought it to the tissues. Okay, so we're not external anymore. We are now internal. This is where we bring oxygen from the bloodstream into actual cells so that it can go through this cellular respiration and create ATP using that oxygen. Okay, this is where we dump one of the byproducts of cellular respiration, CO2, into the blood from the tissue, and we transport that on to back to the lungs. Okay, so that is known as internal respiration. When it comes to the mechanics of breathing, we're talking here about how does it work, like mechanically. Okay, and so when we look at the muscles, the diaphragm, the intercostals, when we look at the different cavity volumes and pressures, that's what we mean when we say the mechanics of breathing. Okay, so when we talk about pulmonary ventilation, how do we bring air in and send air out of the lungs themselves? Well, it all is centered around volume changes in the thoracic cavity. Okay. When we change the volume or the size of this cavity, then we have changes in pressure. Based on those changes in pressure, we either are bringing air into the lungs or sending air out of the lungs. Okay. So those are known as volume changes leading to pressure changes. So this happens in two different phases, breathing in, breathing out, okay, also known as inspiration or inhalation, and expiration or exhalation, okay. And so I encourage you to study this diagram, read the details, okay, about what is the diaphragm doing, what's happening to, the ribs, the chest wall expanding, okay, the chest cavity contracting, all right. Let's take a little closer look. So, inspiration, breathing in. What happens here is the diaphragm contracts and the external intercostal, and we remember those are the muscles between the ribs. So, when we say the diaphragm contracts, it's moving down. Okay, it says here the diaphragm moves inferiorly during contraction. So, moving the diaphragm down increases the volume of the thoracic cavity. Moving these ribs outward, we see right here, it's moving outward. That's going to increase the volume of the thoracic cavity. That's said right here. So when that happens, we have this decrease in pressure in the thoracic cavity because we've just made the area larger, which means the molecules are further apart, which means there's lower pressure. That decrease in pressure causes the external air naturally to move into the lungs, known as inspiration. So basically, the opposite is happening with expiration or exhalation. So this is largely dependent on the muscles just kind of relaxing between the ribs and everything kind of going back to its normal original starting point. Okay. As these muscles relax, as the diaphragm relaxes, it's pushed back up into its natural position. This volume in the cavity has now gone back to where it was. So it's a smaller volume, which means an increase in pressure. And so that is naturally going to send air